Well, hello once again. It's very good to see all of you this morning. Glad that we have another opportunity to continue in our John study, though it's a little bit snowy outside. Some of our people had a little trouble getting here, but everybody's here. We are going to be in John 5 today, and as we have discussed many times in other studies that we've done, just because we're moving to a new chapter, does that mean we're moving to a new section?
No.
But today we are. So.
Wow. I felt that for a second. You're not worthy.
Majority of the time, no, we're not moving on to anything different. Which, to some degree, we kind of are, we kind of aren't. We're going to be moving on to a new miracle that's going to be performed. We're going to discuss the healing of the lame man, or the impotent man, at the pool of Bethsaida. And the similarity that we're going to have from this event and from this context is going to be that of this nobleman that we had coming from Capernaum while Jesus was in Cana of Galilee. So after 2 days, he departed thence, went into Galilee, for Jesus himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. So here Jesus is even recognizing, and he's giving us a lesson as well, that when it comes to trying to help those that we are the closest to, they're going to end up being the hardest ones to try to help. It's as we've said in our other studies, that closeness breeds contentment. People know who you are. They know what you've done, and they know what you've been through, and then you're coming along trying to help them out with something, and it's just the common response of, well, who are you to help me? And that there used to be a saying that if you wanted to make a man an expert, all you do is give him a briefcase and send him 50 miles down the road. Nobody knows who you are, but you come in with that, with that kind of setup and that kind of get up, and people just recognize, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. But with the technology that we have and how it is that everybody's able to keep track of everybody, it's really hard to go anywhere anymore that somebody's not going to know who you are. But with Jesus leaving Samaria after being there for 2 days, going into Galilee, then we have the event with this nobleman, and how it was that with this nobleman, all it took for him to receive and to get what it was that he was seeking after was for him to believe the words that Jesus presented. That the nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down, ere my child die. Jesus saith unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And we use this in our sermon, and how it is that the man believed the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. Not even having to see any kind of sign, not even have to receive any kind of miracle, and even having Jesus come to his literal dwelling place. None of that was needed. Jesus just said it. The man said, all right, I'm going to go home. And as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Thy son liveth. Then inquired he of them the hour when he began to amend, and they said unto him, Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in the which Jesus said unto him, Thy son liveth. And himself believed, and his whole house. This again, the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. So here we have things being set once again in order for us. First is water into wine. Now we have this healing of this man's son who's actually in Capernaum. Does not have to lay hands on him. Doesn't have to go see him. None of that's happening. It's just simply based upon a belief in his word. Now as we come to the healing at Bethesda, we're going to have similar things being mentioned in this context and in this event, but with this event, we're starting a new section in that with chapters 5 through 12 is going to be the length of this section. And what it's going to be is the leaders are going to start opposing Christ in a more public way. Here we have a greater time of conflict than what we've had recorded before. So John 1, you remember, they come to John the Immerser and they're asking him these questions and all these kind of things, but it's kind of done on a hushed level. John chapter 2, with the miracles that are being performed, okay, people are coming and they're kind of starting to ask questions so as to get things riled up, but nothing's really escalated until we get to this point. And part of that is because not just the fact that Jesus heals this man, but if you read ahead, what's the point that the Jews are wanting to get hung up on? All right, that Jesus did this on the Sabbath day. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a little bit of time to study on the Sabbath day so that we do not end up missing something that the Jews actually ended up missing in this context, in this event. So with this new section and this opposition that's going to come upon Jesus at this point, and this, as we know, it's going to escalate until they finally are able to put him to death. But we also know that even in this chapter, they were ready to put hands on him so as to put him to death here. But let's begin this chapter and let's start making some application. So after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there's at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease that he had. Now, I have verse 1 boxed around, and what we're doing with our John studies, that we're reading about these signs that John has recorded, and that we've established that John is recording these miracles or these signs for a very specific reason. And that the signs that are recorded are being recorded so as to reveal something to man about God. And that's the case with this miracle as well. And that is going to reveal something very specific. And that's going to be explained by the sermon that Jesus is going to give after the Jews come trying to question him. Now, with what I have boxed around here, why do you think that that's an important note for us to make?
It's a timestamp.
Okay, it is a timestamp that you have from 4 into 5. What's happened?
He's moving. Jesus is moving from where he was to Jerusalem.
Okay, so where was he?
Samaria.
Okay, so we've gone from Jerusalem 2 and 3 because of Passover, up into Samaria, from Samaria into Galilee. Now we're going back into Jerusalem because we have a feast. More than likely, this is Pentecost. But when we're considering everything that has transpired and everything that's going on, and then also in thinking about what we commonly have to deal with today, can you think of some points of application about, here's Jesus, he's up in this northern area, but it's time to go back to Jerusalem, and he goes back to Jerusalem?
Question's too vague. What's your question? I don't understand.
He makes the journey and the trip to be with God's people when he needs to be in
Okay.
Jerusalem.
So say it louder.
He makes the journey and the trip to be with God's people on the feast day when he needs to be.
Okay, so when we're going through and we're reading this information, we don't just need to go through and read as though we're reading the paper. Stop and ask questions. Okay, why?
Would it be because he knows he is the high priest of the people? Not in the sense of the Jewish tradition, but just in the sense that he's the Messiah, the Savior, but he's also the priest of the people.
All right. He has this responsibility to be in Jerusalem at this time. And just because he's the Son of God, he does not try to remove himself. He's not above this command that God has made that you're supposed to be in Jerusalem at this time. So when we're considering this, it's the idea of just how do people think about going to worship today? Well, I'll make it if I can. It's not that important of an issue. It's not a necessity. It was enough of a necessity for Jesus, the Son of God, that he was just in Jerusalem. Now he's up in Galilee doing work, but he's stopping what he's doing to come back and to worship God. And that as we are, like we're just considering the amount of travel that he's involved in doing, that is, that's a lot of effort. And the idea that we have him walking from place to place. And even consider the conversation that Jesus had with the woman at the well. And what was that conversation like on the topic of worship?
They were wrong because they didn't have the full law.
Okay.
And so he did.
All right.
So
And,
they worshipped correctly.
all right. And so the woman, when she asked about worship, she's asking about, well, we're supposed to go to this mountain. You say we're supposed to go to that mountain. And the answer that Jesus gave is, well, the point is coming to where that's really not going to matter. But even with that understanding, that, okay, eventually this isn't going to matter, we're not at that point yet. And Jesus still recognizes that, okay, this is still in effect. I still need to do this. So it's just a point as we're thinking about and we're considering the life of Christ. And he's our great example of how we're supposed to be. So how should we be when it comes to our assembling together?
This is a command, and we have to do it with the attitude of wanting to pleasing God.
Right. And that it's just, hey, if Jesus is needing to do this, why wouldn't I need to do this? And even in the midst of all the corruption that's going on during this time frame, Jesus doesn't use that as a point of staying away, because there are going to be other people that are coming there for the proper motivation, like we're going to be reading about this man here in just a moment, who's needing to be healed. And it's just, all right, what would be the situation? What would be the case with that man if Jesus stayed away? So it's all just, taking the time to find these little points to be able to draw out and be able to help assist people and to guide them. Because one of the major issues we have is just getting people to the assembly. But if you're able to impress upon them, it's like, well, look at the life of Christ and look at how he dedicated himself to the coming back to God's house, being with God's people, and to be with God. And how that is designed to be a time of refreshing, so as to be able to then go out and do the rest of the work that needs to be done. So when we're considering just that element in verse 1, Jesus is taking the time to do that. It's not something that just needs to be glazed over or passed by, overlooked. So we made all that connection with the woman at the well. So then notice verse 2. So the context takes a bit of a shift from focusing on Jesus coming down to Jerusalem, and now we're taking a focus onto this pool, this pond, however you want to term it, by the sheep market, which is in Jerusalem. So they had this entrance where all these people are bringing in their livestock. making sacrifices, all those kinds of things. And we have it being given to us at this pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue, Bethesda, having 5 porches. Now, what's the significance of this? Why take the time to record this in this fashion of what's about to happen? And especially when you consider what the name of the pool is. And we're wanting to get a revelation about God, who He is, His character. Anybody have a definition in your footnotes?
I don't have a definition, but I have a cross-reference in Nehemiah.
Okay.
It just describes it. It says it had 5
Is it
porches and
gate?
there's 2 on each side.
Okay. The word Bethesda means house of kindness or a house of mercy. And that this is the location where Jesus is going to perform another sign. So once again, we have being revealed to us the mission that God has for His people. He's not coming into the world just so as to bring condemnation. That's John 3. That's not His purpose for coming. His purpose for coming is to save people. And then He performs a sign at Bethesda, a place of mercy and a place of kindness. And then you take into consideration the picture of it having 5 porches. Here are 5 points of access to receive God's mercy or God's kindness. What does that say to us about the God that we serve?
It's available.
He's available. Is He wanting to withhold grace? Is He wanting to withhold mercy? Is He wanting to withhold kindness from us?
No.
No. Here are all these chances, all these multiple access points for you to come in and to receive this. And then you have the Son of God Himself show up at this location, at this place of mercy, performs a miracle for this man. And once again, what do we see with the religious people?
Oh.
Here you are getting angry and upset because some good thing has been done to somebody. Here is a sign of mercy being extended, and instead of being grateful and even looking at the opportunity, it's like, well, wow, if that's what's available to this man, then what's available to me? But they're not viewing God's system in that way. They see it as being something that is designed for everybody else and that it's not designed for me. What you got?
I don't get anything.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Even I heard it.
Yeah, I heard the lips getting wet and
It's
talk.
no, I don't. I have.
So, as we mentioned in chapter 4, the contrast of attitudes between the Samaritans, this man of Galilee, and then now coming back into Jerusalem. And here we are sitting around a feast day. Once again, all of that is designed so as to have these people remember, why are you here? We're here because God has commanded us to be here, but even with that commanding of being here, there's something you're supposed to remember.
Everyone else is wrong but me.
Right. Well, I'm a Pharisee, so I'm all good. And with that attitude, when you would think, okay, here's this religious person who's supposed to have a mindset of helping other people, then you would think, okay, when somebody else gets helped, they would be happy. But as we've been going through our study, we've been finding out that's oftentimes not the case when it comes with religious people. So when we're thinking about these elements and these things are being given to us as descriptors, We don't need to fall into the Pharisee difficulty and the Jewish difficulty of, well, let's just read this so as to read this, and not take into consideration just these crucial points of description that's there to try to teach us.
I would say, in addition to what you just said about these religious people not having kindness and mercy towards others, that is something that has been laid at our feet. We're too legalistic. We don't have kindness and those sorts of things, and we're still, is it true? Are we just more worried about the legalism and following through and going ahead with our baptism and all these things and crossing off the the T's and dotting the I's?
Mm-hmm.
But do we show the love on the other end? And that has been, part of a thing that has bothered us for many years.
Yeah. It all does come back to trying to balance it all. Because even with what we're going to read in just a moment with this impotent man and the healing that he ends up receiving from Jesus himself, Jesus isn't just going around giving that away to anybody. He doesn't give it to the Pharisees. He doesn't give it to the Sadducees. So there is that situation. I was like, yeah, we need to be ready to disperse. I mean, Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 3, the church is involved in helping each other in a time of great famine. But the fact remains is that, but even when it comes to helping people, there are still rules to that. And that we cannot just go over into the other extreme of, well, we're just helping everybody that we possibly can. Because everybody's not in a position or suitable to be helped.
Well, I think that's the common theme that we've seen, that the world expects, quote, Christians, that they have to do all of this goodness all of the time.
Yeah.
And there aren't the rules, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And that even in our study in Matthew, when Jesus is talking, he heals the people, but it's the kingdom first.
Right.
And people don't know that. So that has to be conveyed, and whether or not they accept that, that's the hard part too.
Yeah. And even with what we're going to read here in just a moment with this, this man by the pool of Bethesda, it's a bit of an anomaly with this man receiving what he receives, because does he know who's healing him?
No.
No. It's not revealed until later that it's actually Jesus that's involved in doing this. So, and it's just, it's taking all of this into consideration, and even with, here we are in chapter 5, and not isolating it from everything else that we've been involved in studying. It really is a situation that if you're wanting to make sense of this, you've got to make sure that you're doing your best to tie it all together. So then in verse 3, we have further description being made with these porches and around this pool. And these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease that he had. So this is common knowledge about this location. That here's the event that takes place. If you're wanting to have this assistance being given, then you've got to make sure that you're here. So even with what we have being pictured here, it's not just a loose handout to anybody that's in need. It's a situation of, this event happens. If you are able to make it to this event, then you are the one that's able to receive this. So there we have grace along with man's obedience, so as to be able to get this thing. But what's interesting about the description that's here is that, it did not matter what problem you might have. Impotent folk, blind, halt, withered, mute, dumb, leprosy, whatever it is, whatever your need is, you can come here and God is going to be able to cure it. And here are all of these people, and they're just sitting around waiting for God's help. Now, isn't this a really good picture of all of mankind? Just think about all the different problems, the multitude of problems that mankind has. It's not just we're not just focusing on the physical, we're talking about these internal things. We're talking about the spiritual things that are needing to be worked on just as much as the physical. And that if God is able to work and help these people in all these different forms and these different fashions, then what about when it comes to our internal struggles? He can fix it. He can cure these things. And as we've already established, God has a multitude of entrances, so as to be able to find His mercy and His kindness. And that God makes this offer to you, but you've got to be in a position to receive it. But then also, so let's think about this entire situation that's described to us within itself, before we look specifically at this one man that things are going to get honed in on. Here we have this pool, and it's just at random times an angel would come down, disturb the water, and when you saw, so you're not even seeing the angel itself. All you're seeing is the disturbing of the water. And that's when you know that it's time to get into this water so that whatever you've got going on, you can have it taken care of. And just what do you think about that?
Well, what brings to my mind is, how long had this been going on?
Okay.
I mean, how long in Israel's history had this been going on? It's just kind of the angel swirls the water. This is just unbelievable.
It seems extremely random.
Yes.
And that even with this extra studying that I was trying to do on this particular point, I could not find anything scripturally to lay out where this actually started. So we have no record of it starting, and then just look at it. It's just, okay, different points, an angel comes down, troubles the water. And what I'm trying to have us do is put yourself here. Put yourself here during this time frame, and the realization of there being, okay, at random times an angel could show up. And I know that we read these things and we study these things from the standpoint of, okay, yeah, that is what was going on back then. But could that happen today? Now, Jordan and I have already talked about this, and I'm not trying to get woo-woo with anything, and I'm not trying to move this congregation over to Pentecostalism or anything like that. It's just a simple question.
Are they heavier than a duck?
It seems weird to me, because why would they be impressed with Jesus being able to perform miracles if they can see it happening in the water beforehand? If it had happened before Jesus even arrived.
Right?
And even back in Moses' day, when magicians were able to do all of their whatever miracles, so there's been things seen by people through time, the miracles of time standing still, everything, so they've known about this. We look at
Mm-hmm.
We just have the word, but blessed is he who didn't see and
Right.
believes. It's just incredible, and if you say, could it happen this day? Well, God can do anything, but we have the word, and
Okay.
that's how Jesus stopped Satan.
Okay.
So do we need it?
So I'm not even asking that, and that's fine because that's where our brain goes. Our brain goes with what it is that we know from the scriptures, and that, you quoted correctly with what Jesus would say to his own apostles, and the fact that they have seen these things and believed, and yet here we are, and we are in a greater position because we haven't seen these things, and yet we still believe. But what I'm asking, in just setting all of that to the side, is this possible? And if you're struggling with the answer, then it's showing a bit of a problem.
Well, those signs were there at the time. Well, Jesus' miracles were there for to confirm.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need that.
It's not a matter of needing. I'm not asking if we need it. I'm just simply asking, can it happen?
Well, God can do anything.
Okay.
We don't know everything that is. I would quote Isaiah, but you've proven that that wasn't specific to what I would quote it as. His ways are higher than our ways.
Right.
That sort of thing. But we don't know the 9 to 5 or why he does things specifically unless it's revealed to us.
So part of what I'm wanting us to do is not remove ourselves so far from what's happening here. Because in the grand scheme of things, this was not that long ago. It's not even been 2,000 years when this stuff was happening. So I'm afraid that part of what we do is that in going back and reading the Bible, reading the scriptures, and reading about these things that are taking place here, as though that's often just some distant place outside of our realm. But it's not. So as far as, I know where our brains try to go in trying to make defenses against certain things and against certain positions that we've had to fight against here presently. And I understand that. But it's the same type of situation like when we go through our studies of grace. We know what the denominational world has done with God's grace. So then that has put us in a position to where we've actually had to fight against certain ideas about grace. And because of having to fight those positions, what have we, at times, unintentionally done with God's grace?
Don't get it.
We withhold it. And we start putting it into a box. And it's just, no, you can't touch that. It doesn't get talked about. Doesn't get presented all that often. And if it does, then whoever's doing the presenting kind of gets the looks that you're all giving me now about, well, where's this guy going? Fix your face. No, you're looking really mean. I'm really wishing I hadn't hit my head yesterday because I can tell that I'm struggling.
Can I ask
Yes.
if the miracles are done after the last apostle died, no more laying on of hands and all that stuff, how would this angels coming, or how would this line up with the power was taken away. The Holy Spirit's job was done
Mhm.
after the apostles. So why are angels allowed to do these things?
Well, wouldn't it just be a sign of God's mercy? Because it's not Jesus performing it, and when he was performing miracles, it was to confirm the word. This is just God's mercy.
Yeah.
And how would we know if it was an angel?
So with this, like this is so well documented and so well known as a factual thing. And especially with the kind of people that you're dealing with. Like what we're fixing, well, it'll be next time now. But this is a man that's been this way for 38 years. Everybody knows him. Everybody has record of his problem. So there's no chance of faking it. It's a legitimate thing. So that it's in that kind of realm to where it's almost as if these individuals are able to put their guard down. We have to have our guard up, but their guard is down. So all I'm trying to do is to get us to think about it a little bit differently from how we would normally go about in thinking about these events. Don't think about this from our standpoint today, which that's not what we're supposed to be doing anyways. We're not supposed to be looking at these scriptures through 2024 glasses. We're supposed to be reading this through first century glasses. So then to just have these kind of events today, but then because of, I understand, I'm not trying to go back on what we know about the cessation of miracles. But if God had a purpose for it, couldn't those things start back up again? Or are we so dead set in our position now that we're actually going to go full hog and fully denying that this is even possible? And I'm saying we can't do that. Because even with what the New Testament teaches, are we still not looking for some miraculous events to happen in the future? All right, so Jamie's already nodding. She's already on the track that I'm on. What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm just talking when every knee shall bow.
Okay.
When Jesus comes, when a trumpet shall sound.
Okay.
The day of, the day of judgment.
Right. The second coming is going to be a miraculous event. So why are we struggling with the idea that is it possible for this to happen?
It's not struggling, it's just a thing of, okay, those things are not going on right now. Yes, we can say he could have called legions of angels to come. He could do what he wants, theoretically, yes. If that was wanted, he could do that, send angels. But that's not happening today. There will be things to come when that day comes.
Mhm.
There's not anything going on right now.
Okay, I'm not saying anything is going on right now. So don't read don't read into what I'm asking.
Micah, we love your work, but
Yeah,
we're going to have to...
Don't read into what I'm asking. I'm not insinuating that I've seen anything or experienced anything like that. I'm just
You hit your head on the wall.
right.
I'd like to say I had a conversation with Mike an hour and a half to 2 hours before he hit his head on all this stuff. So,
And we should have recorded it because I think it went a lot better.
yeah, it went a lot better, but they're all holding back the questions, and I was asking all the questions.
Right.
So we were elaborating on this a lot more. So your whole point is, I believe, to help your head, is that the denominations come out and they're so wanting to give this grace, and we danced with Jesus and all this. They use these things that we fight against so much that his point is God can do this. Job, we get that one instance in the Bible that it's not the one instance because of the up and down one that you were talking about, but let's just take Job for a second. The curtain's pulled back a little bit for us to be able to look and see what's going on. There's conversations between God and Satan. That is happening. So the point when we were talking for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I'm pushing back with everything that you guys are all saying, like, or not pushing back, I'm reasoning through. Because I wasn't getting mad at you. I wasn't being, but I was reasoning it through like all you guys, wait a second, what's going on? Reasoning all this stuff through. Well, it's not going to happen. We don't need miracles. Well, the point isn't about miracles. Because, yeah, we don't have the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's done away with. But how does providence work? We don't know. Okay? You know, I'm talking about Edmund being born, and the doctor took forever getting to me, and I believe that that was part of providence. Can't explain it. I don't understand what happened. What happened along the way for the doctor to take forever to get to us to where there was no C-section, which is what they were pushing, blah, blah, blah. We all know that story. So the point is, we don't know how providence works. We don't know anything. But here's an instance to where in real time, in human history, instead of going, oh, wow, the Red Sea, that was just a story. It's like, no, that literally happened. Can you imagine the Red Sea getting parted? That's crazy. Can you imagine a city just because you walked around and shouted crumbled? Like, we need to not be so far away from the spiritual that God is here with us, because that's also what we were talking about. Is when we're at Ronan or whatever, it's like, yeah, we pray to God and he's just out there somewhere. It's like, no, he's here with us. He's our Father. We address him as our Father. You know, as Micah says, we say,
Come before the throne.
come before your throne. We are literally, like, imagine Mordecai, or is it Mordecai and Esther? Yes, I'm coming before you. Like, we are literally praying to God and coming before you. And we need to not get so, God is somewhere way out there. He's here with us. So I believe that's your point, that you're trying to say this was happening within their realm. Now, could it be happening now? Yes, it could happen. We can't explain the why or when it's happening, but we need to not get so distantified from God, and that there are angels, just like you were talking about when it's revealed in the sky, the army.
Oh, right, with Elijah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Elijah, it's revealed and there's angels on. Why is that even happening? That's what we were talking about. Why is that happening? There's no way to explain that. What's the purpose of that? Because that was my whole point, is what's the purpose? What's the purpose? Because it was to confirm the word, all the signs, but we're not talking about signs. We're talking about, are angels still around, and could this happen? Yes, it could.
I wondered that, so
Yes,
I was kind
it
of glad
could.
we came across this, because that's something I've always wondered. So just hearing that, it's like, oh. But then it's also keeping in balance with everything, because like you're saying, if we go too far, like, oh, miracles can't happen like this today, they've happened back then, but God can do anything, so.
I'm laughing just because of your YouTube channel. And like what you said the other night is
Yeah.
we're going to get into some pretty weird stuff. So I'm just like, when I heard, okay, so I was like, all right, this is where it's going to happen.
So then it's like, part of our problem is that we hear brethren say stuff like this, and we start getting afraid that they are going way out somewhere. And sometimes they do. Is there some story about David Shannon's wife? Like, isn't there something that he goes around saying about her at a hospital, and something about angels, this, that, and the other? And I'm saying it's stuff like that that causes the problem.
Well, I think you're right in that sense, because it keeps us on the defensive
Yes.
against well, that's way too far, and then it disallows us to question what can, and then like you say, then we have to keep God in a box, and it doesn't allow us to like, well, this is who God is. We can read this and we can see all of these things. What is it for us? Whether or not it happens, it doesn't matter, because we have the word, but if it
Right.
does, then it happens.
Right. To where we would not need to be in the position of like these Jews, where Jesus shows up and they're wanting to kick against that. And if it's like with me asking these questions, if we're putting God way over here in a distance, and we're not living as though this is the same God that we're serving today, then we've got ourselves a problem. And it is extremely difficult to maneuver ourselves around, because, so this is, it's like going to the point of what the denominational world would try to use as an improper defense, for themselves, and a security blanket for themselves, in that, well, this is just the way different people are brought up, and so on and so forth. Majority of us have been brought up our entire lives hearing about these arguments against miracles. And if we're constantly hearing the arguments against miracles, what's that going to do to our thought processes of miracles? It's going to taint it. So it goes back into making sure that we have that balance, like with grace. Yeah, grace is not just out here all the time for us to just spread around. But that doesn't allow us to go into an extreme position where we start closing it up into a jar and we never let it out. And so it's the same situation with this. That when we look at this and we read this, and it's just, wow, that's an amazing thing, and it's just, that can happen today. There's absolutely no reason that if God wanted to, so that's the problem we get into. It's like, well, why would God want to? I don't get to ask those questions. That's Romans 9, Romans 11, the potter and the clay. If God were to start reinstituting these type of events, He has every right as the Creator to do that. Then the question would be, am I so entrenched in our doctrine, our dogma, that then I would start trying to kick against what God was doing? Now that's the exact thing that's going to happen with the Jews when it comes to the Sabbath day. They were going to allow a misunderstanding about the Sabbath day and allow that to overrun God's sovereignty as being supreme. And that same thing can happen to us. What were you going to say?
Hold on. Okay. You were also mentioning, though, that because it's like, this could happen today. Well, why? We don't get to ask that. But then I was like, but whoever's used that to, and then you summed it up. Yes, they use it to discredit the word. So, well, I don't have to go to the word because I danced with Jesus, so I can just do that and I don't have to go to church. Or, church services. So I want you to elaborate on that. That they do it to get rid of the word. Anything that would happen, if it happened, if God decided to let it happen, it couldn't go against the word. It would only be, I don't know what it would be for. I can't get past that line, but I know what you're trying to say. I wanted you to elaborate on that they try to get rid of the word.
Right, so they try to use their experiences so as a means to get further and further away from God actually says, whereas with us, hopefully the view, like in what's being recorded here, the things that are being done here and recorded here are designed so as to get people closer to God and following His word. I mean, the parting of the Red Sea, all of that was designed so as to get the people closer to God, not to just, well, that just opens the floodgates to all these different elements and all these different kind of things. No, you don't get to do that. But it is a so just to sum it up, if I can. I'm not trying to present anything so as to get us further away from what we have here. But the fact remains that this is recorded in here so as to get us closer to this. And that with that being the case, and those, like these two things actually working hand in hand together, then there's nothing, there's nothing wrong in viewing with the possibility that we could start being visited by angels again. I'm not saying that it is happening. Just the reality that it could. Because that Hebrew passage that says that, God is the same today, yesterday, and forever, that okay, that these are some of the tools and some of the means in which He operates, then He's got every right to use those tools.
What's the difference between a miracle and providence?
So miracle is supernatural. Providence is just the using of everyday events. And it's with, the best example is Joseph being sold by his brothers, picked up, taken into slavery, taken to Potiphar's house, has success there, but ends up in jail and then ends up second in command to Pharaoh. There's no miraculous intervening in that situation to where like God holds the sun or anything like that. The only point in which a miraculous event shows up is when Pharaoh has the dream and he has to have it interpreted. But everything else is just common day occurrences. Here are these men on their way to on their way to Egypt to be involved in slave trade. Okay, that happens every day. But it ended up being used and played out for God's deliverance. So that's the major difference between providence and a miracle. And that's one of the things that causes a lot of individuals, and I would say correctly, to argue how providence is greater than the miraculous. Because with the miraculous, in a situation like this, like, okay, yeah, I can pinpoint. Yeah, okay, God did that. But with providence, there's so much internal maneuvering going on that it's just like, was that? And if so, just, okay, that's amazing how all that worked out. It's like what Jordan's describing with their recent birth. It's like, okay, trying to do everything you can, stay away from a C-section.
Toes.
And everything played out. So where's, huh? I refuse. Everything played out. You don't have to have a C-section. Okay, can we just pinpoint, like, well, that was an act of God? No, I can't do that. But if He had some type of hand in it, that's amazing.
But isn't
If you wanted to use angels,
but isn't everything an act of God though?
No.
Throughout the world?
Providence. Providence is everyday occurrences. Through everyday occurrences, God can bring about good with that, but there's no angels involved in it.
How do you know?
Because that wouldn't be an everyday occurrence. That would be God intervening with.
But that's the point of providence, is God intervening. That's what the word providence means.
Said through everyday occurrences.
Yeah. And you have Joseph at the end of all of it saying that God was interweaving what you desired for evil, God desired for good. And that phrase literally means an intertwining. So God wasn't absent.
I didn't say he was absent.
Okay. But everything with an angel showing up isn't a miraculous event either. I'm not saying that angels did show up with Joseph's event, but angels come and do physical things.
you also said something today that we weren't talking about the other day. You said today that all you see is the
Well, that's when the record would have to tell us.
That's the point. We always think it's no God using the force, and that's how providence works. Angels, can he use angels? Can we see angels? No, that's the point. If you wanted to use angels during the Joseph thing, he can. Can we prove it? No, unless it's written. But previous chapter, spirit and truth. We have to mix the word with that. We are praying to a spiritual God. We are worshiping a spiritual God. When we're about to take the Lord's Supper, it's not just the cracker and the juice. It's what it does. Jesus is here. God is here. Not being weird, like some people. But we have to mix this thing, is the point.
Because even when a person obeys the gospel and they're being baptized and they have their sins forgiven, that's a spiritual act. I don't know what's taking place. I don't know how it works. But the fact remains that it is a spiritual act, a spiritual event that's taking place in our physical world.
I said, isn't God everything providence then? And you said no, but I was trying to get back on that. Wouldn't it be God is in control of everything, and he set everything up, so is everything the providence of God, or is it just specific events that God has his hand in? And then how would that not be a miracle?
So that's the other part about it, is that, so like when we're thinking about the situation with Joseph, God has a bigger plan in play during this time frame, which is
Jesus.
okay. So when we're thinking about Joseph and the things that are playing out with him, okay, that had to play out that way, because God has made certain promises that he's going to keep this family alive so that the Messiah can come from this family. Well, all right, there's a famine coming. So God's going to work this out to where they're going to be protected from the famine, and this promise is able to keep going. So when I consider my life in view of that life, my life is not on the same track. Now, is there purpose to what we're doing today? Sure there is. To where we're looking at everything that's played out in the last 3 or so years to get all of us here to this point. Why not look at that as being providential? And there's nothing wrong with that, because we know the will of God is that he wants men and women to be saved. And that, okay, here's this terrible situation that's going on in Virginia, and though it looks like it's just playing out with natural events, but then we end up getting connected with complete strangers way out in Montana.
I go back even 37 years with me, thinking I was baptized, and everything that I went through to the point of where it ended up, where all the events that happened had to expose sin in the camp over in Tennessee too. That's how far back I go, looking at the providence of this, you know, because I'm thankful that God allowed me to live long enough to be able to make amends with him in order to be baptized, because I was not back when I was 19.
So as we're saying about trying to like pinpoint everything, no, we're not going to be able to pinpoint everything. And it's only with this John 5 account that we know that this is the way that it is, because we're being told. Same thing with Joseph. The only reason why we know with Joseph is because Joseph is telling us that these are the things playing out in the way and form and fashion that they did. But then you also have passages like this in Ecclesiastes 9, verse 11. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happens to them all. To where, like, looking at the events that happened to me yesterday, I don't see that as being some providentially planned out situation.
Yeah. Not yet.
Yeah, just
Could an angel have been there? Could have.
could have, but I would argue that there was an angel there, it wouldn't have happened.
The demon making you slip.
Right. I mean, it's just, that's time and chance. The more and more that you do something like that, the more statistically it is that something bad is going to happen. The longer you drive, the higher the number goes up that something bad is going to happen to you. Okay, that's time and chance. But then there are some things that end up happening, and it's just like, time and chance doesn't quite explain this. And with the way that everything plays out. I can't put my hand on it, can't put my thumb on it, but, and that's where Paul says perhaps to Philemon.
Can you explain Hebrews 1:13 and 14 about the angels being ministering spirits? Are you suggesting that they come physically, or how do you think that
Well, you'd have to say it louder because I can't hear you.
In Hebrews 1:13 and 14 about angels being ministering spirits, how is it you think they minister?
I'm still not catching it.
Something about Hebrews 1:13.
Speak louder.
Hebrews 1:13 and 14, where it talks about angels being ministering spirits.
Yeah,
How do you think they minister?
we have all kinds of different examples throughout Old Testament, New Testament. When Jesus was praying and was in need of strength, an angel showed up. After his temptation with the devil, and he's been fasting 4 days, 40 nights, angels came and ministered.
How would that work now?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not saying that it is working now. No, I've already answered that. No, it's not happening.
But how do you know it's not happening?
Because we don't have these kinds of records.
But the water.
It could happen. It's
But
just-
it could.
But how would we have the record then?
Now, see, that's the thing. Not going to. Why not?
Not right now,
Why not?
because we've been given the word,
Okay.
and we are going to go through until the time comes in that day. But are angels involved physically today in doing things? No.
Why?
You don't get to say either way that there's an angel involved in this or that.
Okay, but neither do you. Because if we're looking at Israel's history, they had the Word of God too.
That is also in a time when they have miraculous things going on.
All right.
And angels are being sent
Okay.
to do something
But having
miraculous.
But having a Word of God does not necessitate that angels have to be absent. Does it?
An angel being physically involved in doing something today, why did they get that favoritism? Why did they get that miraculous thing happening?
Like who?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all just through providence that things can work out for the good, and God has a hand in that. But He's not sending angels to do stuff.
How do you know that?
How do you know that He is sending angels to do
I didn't
stuff?
say that I did. I'm saying it's a possibility, but you're holding on to it as though it is a definite that he can't.
He can do whatever He wants to. but
Okay.
He said what He's going
And
to
that's all that
do.
I'm
He's going
presenting.
to stick to the promise that He made on what He's going to do.
My question is, you said it's not happening so we would have record of it, right? But the water is just something's happening to the water. It's happening. Don't know, like, we don't really know what's happening to the water, right? It's just something's disturbing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's to heal them, though. That is a miraculous thing.
But my point is, you said, how do we know that it wouldn't happen? But we need record of it if it is going to happen. But if it's going to happen and we don't have record of it, does that mean that it's not going to happen?
Why is he stirring the water? He's stirring it so that they can have this miraculous healing. That is a miracle. That is one of those events. We don't have angels come and stirring waters to heal people today.
But could we? That's all I'm asking is, could we?
Theoretically, anything God wanted
Okay,
to
that's-
happen. He could burn up this whole United States if he wanted
Okay,
to.
so-
It's going to
not
happen.
going to, because that's what he had promised he was going to come on that day, and that's when we're
Michael's
going to see
coming.
signs.
Like I said, I'm not trying to branch out into anything that is happening
It
today.
sounds like it.
Oh, well, you can't go off of what
Angel
sounds
involved
like.
in birth or something?
Huh?
That there's an angel involved in the birth? That's what it sounds like you guys are saying.
If providence happens, how does God use providence?
We don't know the means.
That's the point. That's the
But
point.
saying
That's
that
it.
an angel was
I
somehow
didn't say that.
interceding or
I
involved,
didn't
that's what
say
it
that.
sounded.
No. The point is, because I said everything you're saying. There's no point in it. I said everything you're saying. I was in the living room for an hour and a half.
Sing it better.
No, I was there. Yes.
I'm kidding.
I,
I'm saying, yes, I believe through providence it worked out to where there wasn't a C-section. Yes, I believe providentially that happened, but to say that there's an angel involved in that, you can't say that, you can't prove that.
he didn't say anything was involved. I
That's
believe
what
that.
it sounds like he's pushing.
No. Yes, that at first it sounds like that.
But the
that's not-
crossroad that we're at, pun intended, is like with the thief on the cross. You're trying to build the same argument. Well, you can't prove that he was baptized. You can't prove that he wasn't. So that doesn't prove anything.
That angels are miraculously doing these things.
It's not always miraculous.
The point is, could God still use angels? Yes. Does he? We don't know. So the point was an interesting note.
The angels showing up to Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah and giving him a message, you think that's miraculous? Anybody could have done that.
Angels aren't showing up today. And
But no, don't run from the argument. Was that miraculous? Them just showing up in Sodom, going to his house, saying, hey, you need to get out.
angels aren't showing up today. Chris.
You're not
That's what I'm
answering the
saying.
question.
You
You're not answering the
showing
question.
up in Sodom and Gomorrah.
But I brought that up too, and that the fact that the homosexuals didn't know they were angels till the bright light happened. They just thought they were men. So until you're told or shown that they're angels, you don't know. Same thing with Mary Magdalene and the other woman coming, and there's two men at the temple, but they're at tomb. We don't know that they're angels till we're told it through the word.
Is it when Jesus ascends as well? They're just standing there?
Yes.
What are you guys
They're
looking
in
at?
there, yes. We don't know they're angels except for the word tells us they're angels. People have entertained angels without knowing about it. Yeah, but that only happened back then. But could it happen now? Well, you can't prove it. That's right. But could it happen? Yes. That's the end of the argument.
Yeah, that's the
it.
only point I'm trying to make is trying to get us away from this defensive mechanism.
See it?
You
Louder.
say someone could be here and be an angel.
Well, even in
Could be.
the Bible times, they weren't even told. So during that time, they didn't even know they were in the presence of angels without being told. So that could still happen.
But there's the other side of things that Bryn's whispering to me saying, well, that could be dangerous because she, coming from a denominational background, has all these people that have seen angels. So
Okay,
it's this
but
balance we're
but
trying
that's the thing. Just because of that danger, does that mean we have to stay away from this?
Well, that's the point.
Okay.
Is the balance. That's
Yes.
what you're trying to say is that we get so caught up in our defense against denominational, ooh, I've seen angels, and an angel talked to me and told me to do this and all this sort of stuff, that we say, no, that can't happen emphatically when we're just as the same as them. And we don't have that balance, like, well, yes, it could happen, we don't know, end of story, we have the Bible, let's live our lives according to the Bible.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything about the Bible. Because I kept bringing up the Santa Claus, how they're in the elves are in the classroom the whole time. It's like, we don't know if that's happening.
That there could be an angel here somewhere walking on this earth, could we know?
So what about Santa?
You have to watch the movie.
Oh.
I have to show you. You're saying it couldn't happen.
That there'd be an angel walking around
Yeah.
talking to people today? No.
Why?
So you would have to prove that that was an angel that came.
The point is, could it happen?
You could go over a billion, could it happen, could this happen, could that happen?
That's
What are you
the
saying?
only point.
Yeah, that's the only
That's
point.
the only point. It ends there.
You're believing that there could be angels today walking among us.
There
Could
could.
it happen is the argument.
Could God do this or that? Could he do that if he wanted to? Yes, but no, that is not happening.
Can't say no. But I would say there'd have to be a point. And
Yeah,
that was my
if
point
you're
the other day.
if you're opening it up to the possibility that yes, then you can't turn back around and say no.
I'm saying God, if you're talking about hypothetical, God could do whatever he wanted to with
Mhm.
that. We do not have any of those type of things going on where there's this intervention.
Okay, I'm not saying that there is. I'm just saying we don't need to be so defensive to the possibility.
That there could be an angel walking around on this earth.
Could be. I'm just saying, stranger things have happened.
In a time where those were happening.
Okay, and what if God were to decide that the time were to come again? There have been other times of silence throughout Israel's history where God didn't speak, prophets didn't speak, but then they started again. I'm saying we don't need to be so defensive that if it were to start happening, that we get dug in.
There would be no point for it happening.
You can't argue that.
When
How do you know what
things are
God's
going
point
to
is?
happen again.
How do you know what God's point is?
He tells us what's going to happen.
But God interceded throughout the Old Testament. Even with the
End it.
calm down.
I am calm. This is a defense.
Okay, well we're not wanting to get defensive. There's nothing to get defensive about. Okay, so final point. I'm not saying that it is happening.
But we're going to destroy the tape.
Right.